2, he's hurt. He's hurt to the body. Wow! Oh, what a comeback from Gane.
This Saturday is UFC 285. We have Ciryl Gane facing off against Jon Jones. And not only can Ciryl Gane win, he has a clear path to make it look easy. Let's get into it. In this video, I'm going to be breaking down a few of Jon's past fights, showing a few areas of weakness and potential opportunity for Ciryl Gane that if he uses these to his advantage, he can make this fight look easy and win it on a decision. So let's go back to the Jon Jones and Anthony Smith fight, one of his recent fights a few years ago, just after his return versus Alexander Gustafsson. If you recall, Anthony Smith was like a deer in headlights fighting this fight. Anthony Smith had very minimal footwork in this fight. He just stood there and allowed Jon to enter at will, push him up against the cage, use his clinch work, use his ground and pound, use his pressure to get Anthony Smith down and keep him there, also keep him away from the cage at the same time. The Anthony Smith fight with Jon Jones is something that Ciryl Gane can take a big lesson from. Two areas that Anthony was really lacking in this fight was his footwork and his fight IQ. As you'll see here, Anthony Smith is about to throw a high kick, which gets caught by Jon, pushed up against the cage, and then taken down. This wasn't a very smart decision, especially without feinting. It was fairly obvious, not fast as well, and easy for Jon to catch. Once you have Jon and Anthony up against the cage, Anthony is doing his best job to keep the underhooks and not get taken down. But Jon has a significant size advantage over Anthony Smith. His legs are significantly larger, he's significantly taller and stronger, which allows him to get the double underhook under the butt, scoop, and suplex down. Now, what does Ciryl Gane have that Anthony Smith doesn't have that he can use to make that not happen? For one, Ciryl Gane is a much bigger man. Ciryl Gane is the biggest man Jon Jones has fought yet to date. But more importantly, Ciryl Gane has excellent footwork. Ciryl Gane is able to move side to side, lateral, forward, in and out movement, and use explosive punches and cause damage to Jon as he's doing it. Anthony Smith was just there for the taking. You have to earn Jon's respect. You'll see right here with Anthony on the ground, this is the exact position that Ciryl Gane wants to avoid himself being in. We're going to review the Francis fight a little later in the video, but if Ciryl gets to this spot where he's not up against the cage, he's on his back and Jon is on top of him, obviously he's going to be in a very bad spot. This is the #1 area he wants to avoid getting to. Next, let's take a look at Jon versus Alexander Gustafsson 2. This is another example of what Ciryl Gane can learn from to not do to avoid getting taken down and caught up by Jon Jones. If you remember Jones versus Alex 1, Alex had such incredible footwork. He was able to move around and pivot on the outside of the octagon, not allowing himself to be a stationary target for Jon to go after. And combined with that, the most important thing is he was willing to inflict damage. He had a confidence that he could beat Jon Jones unlike any other fighter recently. However, when you go look at their second fight, it was a little bit different. I rewatched this entire fight and you could see Alex coming out much more hesitant, much slower on his feet, and much less of a mobile target. You can see he's bouncing and jumping around, but he's not really moving laterally, he's not moving side to side too much, and he's not really playing with the distance the same way he did in the first fight. So you'll see what Jon's able to do. Jon's able to time a perfect double leg takedown, get on top of them, get his back onto the octagon, right in the center, not up against the cage, and this is where Jon excels. When Jon gets you down, if you're not up against the cage, it's very unlikely you're going to get back to your feet, unless you're a very good defensive grappler, which Ciryl Gane is not shown to be. Now, I feel like this stuff is all fairly obvious, right? Of course, don't get taken down, move, and do damage, right? But let's look a little bit further into who's actually been able to have success with Jon Jones recently and how they did it. So let's take a look at the Thiago Santos fight, right? Thiago was smaller than Jon. He actually injured himself in the very first round and had his mobility significantly decreased and was still able to use his overall mobile game plan to be able to avoid getting taken down from Jon for the majority of the fight. And the biggest thing I believe that caused Jon the most trouble in this fight was Thiago was willing to engage. Anytime Jon wanted to play ball, Thiago wanted to play it back. He didn't just stand there and let Jon Jones be Jon Jones. You'll see here, look at the movement, look at the side to side movement. He's never stationary, he's never in one spot. Jon is unable to time a takedown. He's also keeping his back to the cage, right? So that way if Jon does push in and does go for the takedown, guess what? Your back is already up against the cage, and that is where Jon is shown to have less of a chance of keeping you down. You'll see here, even in the engagements, he's never stopping his in and out movement. You'll see Jon goes for the takedown. Guess what? He couldn't get it. The footwork was too strong. You'll see here, even when he's in the firefight with Jon, look at his footwork. He's always in and out, side to side, and that's what it gave him the ability to be unpredictable when Jon was going in for the takedown. It's a lot easier to take someone down if they're only ever moving front and backwards, right? Because you know if you catch them going forwards, you just pile into them straight and you'll get them. But when the fighter's consistently moving side to side and not in a predictable manner, they're switching it up. When you go for your takedown, it's much easier for the fighter to defend and just pivot off to a different direction and stop the takedown. Another fight where this was shown very clearly, and it was one of Jon's recent fights, his actual last fight in light heavyweight, Dominick Reyes. Now look at Dominick Reyes, right? One of the only light heavyweights to actually have a similar build to Jon. He still didn't match his reach or height. Ciryl Gane has those beat in both areas, and look what he was able to do to Jon in this fight. He arguably won this fight. Look at the footwork here, right? He did something just like Thiago. In and out, side to side. Always moving, always willing to engage. That's what stopped him, right? And always having his back to the fence. You do not want to be the one on the inside. You don't want to give Jon the ability to take you down in the middle of the octagon. That is what you want to avoid. All Ciryl needs to do is replicate these same strategies that Thiago and Dominick Reyes have used. So let's take a look right here, right? Here Jon goes for the takedown, pushes him back up against the fence, gets the takedown, but because Dominick has his back up against the fence, he's able to return. Something else you need to remember, all of Jon's fights for most of his career, he was significantly taller, larger, and bigger than these guys, right? That makes it easier to grapple and hold them down. He doesn't have that same advantage over Ciryl Gane. Ciryl Gane is taller than Jon Jones. While he does have a little bit of a reach disadvantage, it's still the biggest reach Jon has ever fought against. Combine that with Ciryl's going to be the strongest guy Jon has ever fought against at heavyweight. If you look at him versus Francis, they're roughly the same size. It's like a Francis with incredible footwork and movement. So let's take a look at Ciryl Gane versus Derrick Lewis. I know Derrick Lewis is no Jon Jones by any stretch, but what I want you to look for is his footwork and his movement. It's the same two traits that showed to give Jon trouble in his past fights. Moving in and out, side to side, and a high willingness to cause damage when Jon moves in. Look at this clip with Derrick here. Watch Ciryl Gane's legs, right? Watch the range management he's able to do with Derrick Lewis. Every time Derrick even comes remotely into range, Ciryl Gane is moving backwards. If Derrick rushes him, Ciryl Gane is not just moving backwards in a straight line, he's moving backwards and circling, keeping his back to where the octagon fence would be. That's exactly what he needs to do against Jon Jones, and he needs to do it even better than he did against Derrick Lewis. Now, if you remember the Ciryl Gane versus Francis fight, you might remember it as a fight where Francis easily took Gane down and laid on him for all 25 minutes, but that's really not the truth of this fight. If you watch the first round here, look at the footwork again. Side to side, good head movement. Obviously, he's fighting Francis. He was very worried about getting that KO strike. That's how he's going to have to fight, and I believe he's going to have to fight exact same game plan against Jon Jones, but be more aware that the wrestling is coming. Anytime Jon moves in and tries to use his range, Ciryl needs to get off to the left, get off to the right, and propose a good counter. Make Jon pay for trying to move into that distance. And absolutely, no matter what, Ciryl Gane cannot stay stationary. He cannot stay only moving front and backwards. He needs to continue moving his circling movements around the cage. So you'll see here, this is where Francis gets his first takedown of the fight, right? Francis slowly walked Ciryl back up towards the octagon, pushed him where he ran out of space, ran out of movement to be able to dodge the takedown, caught a high kick, which is the number one thing Ciryl Gane is going to need to worry for. If Ciryl Gane is using those kicks like he does in a lot of his fights, the head kicks in the middle of the octagon, Jon Jones will catch that like a wide receiver on a football team and suplex your ass down to the ground. He has to be very careful of those kicks. I would say leg kicks only, and just use your boxing, Ciryl. Use your boxing, your footwork, your leg kick. Do not expose your legs. You'll see here Francis is able to catch one of his legs, pick him up, reverse, and slam right on the ground. However, he was right next to the cage, and as you'll see here, Ciryl Gane is able to get to the cage, lift himself up, and get back up. Now let's go to another takedown Francis was able to get, because this is a situation I very likely see Ciryl being in during the Jon Jones fight. He's being pushed up against the cage. He has over-under hooks. Francis is able to pick him up, slam him down, and keep him away from the cage. Notice how Francis is in between Ciryl and the cage, right? This is going to make it incredibly difficult for Ciryl to get back up, and this is exactly what Jon Jones is going to want to do to him. I don't need to show any more of this round. Francis was able to lay down on Ciryl and hold him down for the entirety of the round because he's in the center of the octagon now. Again, he's not up against the cage. So how does Ciryl Gane do this? Rounds 1 through 5, how is he going to be able to outclass, survive, and avoid the takedowns from Jon Jones? He needs to fight exactly like he did against Derrick Lewis, but show some actual takedown defense and takedown defense knowledge. If he can do that, he can make this fight look absolutely easy. Look again how his footwork is with Derrick Lewis, right? Derrick Lewis has nowhere near the range and length of Jon Jones. However, Ciryl Gane is nowhere near the range and length of Jon Jones' opponents. And while you can look at Jon Jones as the GOAT and you can say he's never lost, you need to look at his last performances and how he's been performing. Jones versus Alexander Gustafsson. Jones won very clearly. Good fight for Jones. Jones versus Smith. Jones won very clearly. I would argue Smith didn't show up that night, but still, good fight for Jones. But then you start getting to Jones versus Thiago Santos, and again, we go back to that fight. Thiago is essentially a smaller, less dangerous version of Ciryl Gane, who was injured on one leg and arguably won the fight. I watched that fight live. I'm sure many of you did as well. I'm not going to say it was a robbery. It wasn't. But the fact that this man was injured on one leg and was still able to use his mobility to avoid significant takedowns, and he was able to use his willingness to strike, to put Jon at bay and survive the entire fight. Can you imagine what Ciryl Gane can do as the much bigger man, the faster man, the heavier hitting man? What he can do if he's just able to keep moving side to side, in and out, and cause damage. So as you can see here, not only can Ciryl Gane win this fight, there's a very clear path and game plan for him to do it and make it look easy. You may very well see Ciryl Gane circle around the octagon the entire fight, do some good low leg kicks, some calf kicks, don't get that kick too high, pop out your jab, make Jon feel that extra size and range, keep moving. I know I say it a million times in this video, but that literally is the key. Keep on moving, stay on that bike, don't get off the treadmill. If he can do that, you could very well see a fight where Jon is walking around, trying to do it, getting outstruck the entire time, unable to take him down, maybe get one takedown, but he gets back up because he's against the cage. That fight is very likely and very possible if Ciryl Gane comes in with this game plan. Because I don't think a lot of people are looking at this fight like this. Ciryl Gane best represents the traits that gave Jon the most problems in his last fights. The length, the size, the movement, the willingness to strike. But this isn't a prediction video, this is just a breakdown. And I'll have a breakdown of how Jon Jones can beat Ciryl Gane coming in a few days, as well as my prediction video for the full card following after that. So let me know what you guys think in the comment section down below. Do you think Ciryl Gane's gonna win this fight? Do you agree with my breakdown about his game plan and how we should approach it? Let me know.